interview with the American CBS News, President al-Assad says we are open up to any dialogue based on mutual respect without violating national sovereignty. Syrian Arab Army inflicts heavy losses on the terrorists in men and material in Daraa, Qunaytira, Idlib and Hama countryside. 13 civilians are killed in air raids launched by the Saudi-led coalition against Yemen as the death toll of the victims of Hawaija refugee camp rises to 45. Good afternoon, this is News English from the Syrian Arab Television in Damascus. President Bashar al-Assad has said Saudi Arabia is a dictatorial regime from the Middle Ages, living outside history, and is based on a Wahhabi obscurant ideology. It is the result, the president added, of a mixture between Wahhabism and a political system that has been going on for 200 years. It carries the ISIL's same ideology. This also applies to al-Qaeda and al-Nusra front. The president affirmed in an interview with the American CBS News. President Assad said in that interview that Erdogan does not only ignore terrorists crossing into Syria but also directly supports them logistically and militarily and on a daily basis. What happened in Kobani or Ain al-Arab, the president pointed out, is the best example.
Some say that ISIS was the best thing to happen to you and that even some of the things that you have done have benefited ISIS. That because of what ISIS has done and because of your fight against the moderates in your country who, in terms of the Arab Spring, wanted to see more democracy here, that you, in the effort to crush them, allowed ISIS to grow.
Let's go back to what President Obama said in one of his interviews recently, when he said that the moderate opposition in Syria is elusive. That's very clear by President Obama, and we always said there's no moderate opposition. So the rise of ISIS wasn't sudden again. The evisceration, the amputation, eating the hearts of the victims started from the very beginning, and even beheading started from the very beginning of the conflicts. It started what they called the moderate opposition, then it continued with al-Nusra, then with ISIS. So what happened with those three, including ISIS, they attack military bases, they kill our soldier, and they destroy our economy. How could, according to this logic, how could that be the best thing happen to me? In what logic? To lose? To destroy the country, to kill your supporters, and to kill others, and to kill civilians? In what sense could that be the best thing that happened to me or to the government? That's illogical, that's unrealistic, that's unpalatable.
When you, again, I come back to the idea of how now, with the new reality of ISIS, how it's changed the circumstances. As they have gained in strength, what new changes do you see in attitude towards you and staying and the Syrian government?
Regarding the West, you mean?
Yes.
I think the West has changed its calculations after the rise of ISIS, but that doesn't mean they changed their approach to the conflicts in Syria, in Iraq, and in our region. I don't think they've learned the lesson well, and that as a result will not change the course of the event, because the very beginning of the problem from the Western perspective is to change the system or the president or the government that they don't like, and they are still moving in the same direction. That's why nothing concrete has changed yet, only the appearance and the priority. Their priority is to fight ISIS, but that doesn't mean their priority to get rid of ISIS.
How can you see the United States cooperate with Syria regarding ISIS?
There's no direct cooperation.
But how do you see the future?
The future, I mean. In the future, there must be a direct dialogue in order to fight terrorism, because the terrorism is on our ground, on our soil. They cannot defeat it without our cooperation, without having our information, because we live with this. and we know the reality and how to defeat it.
You have often spoken about the danger of a wider war in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Let me talk about the parties involved and characterize how you see them. Let me begin with Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia is anarchic autocracy, medieval system that's based on the Wahhabi dark ideology. Actually, let's say it's a marriage between the Wahhabi and the political system for 200 years now. That's how we look at it.
And what is their connection to ISIS?
The same ideology, the same background.
So ISIS and Saudi Arabia are one and the same?
The same ideology, yes.
Same ideology.
Ideology, it's Wahhabi ideology. Their ideology is based on the books of the Wahhabi in Saudi Arabia.
So you believe that all Wahhabis have the same ideology as ISIS?
Exactly, definitely. And that's known by ISIS, by al-Qaeda, by al-Nusra. It's not something we discover or we try to promote. It's very, their books, they use the same books to indoctrinate the people.
How about Turkey?
Turkey, let's say, is about Erdogan, his Muslim Brotherhood fanatics.
And
doesn't mean that he's a member, but he's a fanatic.
President Erdogan is
the Muslim Brotherhood fanatic. And he's somebody who's suffering from political megalomania, and you think that he's becoming the Sultan of the new era, of the 21st century.
You think he could stop the border if he wanted to?
Yeah, of course, definitely. He doesn't only ignore the terrorists from coming to Syria, he supports them logistically and militarily, directly, on daily basis. And if you take the example of Kobani, what he called it Kobani, it's called Ain al-Arab, the city where the Kurds were fighting ISIS and where the campaign started, the military campaign, the American military campaign started there. It took them 4 months to liberate that small city, not only because the airstrikes were cosmetics, as we said, but because of the direct support of the Turks to ISIS.
When you look at the future, and you look at the battle ahead, how much of the conflict that's here today can the Syrian government withstand? How much the Syrian country, the civilian loss? Will there be anything left in Syria?
Yeah, of course, Syria still here. It's not the first kind of crisis that you've been facing during
but nothing like
the history. No, during the history, you had many crises similar. Damascus and Aleppo has been destroyed many times, but it's about the population. The Syrian population are determined to survive and to protect their country and to rebuild it. How much? It's about the potent power that every population have, and the Syrian people prove that they have strong potential in that regard. Anyway, we don't have any other option. What option do we have? Whether we suffer, whether we pay high price or less price. Well, what options do we have? But to defend our country, but to fight terrorism? We don't have any other option.
I asked the question because many asked, what's the cost to Syria of what it's going through? Mm-hmm. And how will you put the pieces back together? Whenever there is finally an end to this, how will you put the pieces back together, and who will put the pieces back together?
There's misconception in the West that what's happening in Syria is a civil war. This is where you can ask that question. What's happening in Syria is not civil war. When you have civil war, you should have, clear lines separated between different sects or ethnicities or different components. That's not what we have. What we have are terrorist infiltrated areas, and people are suffering from the fight with those terrorists and from the terrorism of those terrorists. So you don't have division in the society now. You don't have the sectarian issue now. Actually, you will be surprised if I tell you that the sectarian situation in Syria today is better than the sectarian situation, let's say, before the crisis. People are more unified now regarding the conflict, regarding the unity of the sect, the religions, and so on. So we cannot talk about how can you rebuild, let's say, the society. The society suffering from humanitarian aspect of the problem, but it's not divided anymore. That's very important. And that's why we are assured that, even this conflict, which is very bad conflict, as you say, every cloud must have silver lining, and this is the silver lining in this conflict, that the population are more unified now. So we don't have problem as long as the society is unified and homogeneous. Regardless of some dark part of this society, ideological corners in our society that support the Wahhabi, support ISIS, and support the extremists, but it's not the general situation in our society.
Secretary Kerry had made his remarks. My impression once I got here is that when you heard those remarks, you were optimistic. The State Department backed back a little bit and said, we still think there needs to be a new government. But you were optimistic after you heard that. You believe there is a way for your government and the American government to cooperate and coordinate.
That's not the main point regarding that statement. I think the main point, we could have a feeling, and we hope that we are right, that the American administration started to abandon this policy of isolation, which is very harmful to them and to us, because if you isolate country, you isolate yourself as the United States from being influential and effective in the course of events, unless you are talking about the negative influence, like making embargo that could kill the people slowly, or launching war and supporting terrorists that could kill them in a faster way. So our impression, let's say, we are optimistic, more optimistic, I wouldn't exaggerate, that at least when they're thinking about dialogue, doesn't matter what kind of dialogue and what the content of the dialogue, and even doesn't matter of what their real intentions, but the word dialogue is something we haven't heard from the United States on the global level for a long time.
But you just did from the Secretary of State. We need to negotiate.
Exactly.
That's dialogue.
That's what I said. That's why I said it's positive. That's what I said. We are more optimistic. When they abandon this policy of isolation, things should be better. When you start the dialogue, things will be better.
Why don't you reach out to Secretary Kerry and say, let's talk?
Are they ready?
Let's talk.
We are always open. We never close our doors. They should be ready for the talk. They should be ready for the negotiations. We didn't make the embargo in the United States. We didn't attack the American population. We didn't support terrorists who did anything in the United States. Actually, the United States did. We always wanted to have good relations with the United States. We never thought in the other direction. It's a great power. Not a wise person think of having bad relations with the United States.
But can you have good relationship with a country that thinks you shouldn't be in power?
No, this is not going to be part of the dialogue, as I mentioned earlier. This is not their business. We have Syrian citizens who can decide this, no one else. Whether they want to talk about it or not, this is not something we're going to discuss with anyone.
In cooperation with the People's Defense Units and the inhabitants and residents, a Syrian Arab Army unit has intercepted an attack by a terrorist group on al-Mabouja village in Salamiya suburbs in central Syria, inflicting on its members heavy losses. The terrorist attack has left 44 people dead and injured 21 others. Syrian Arab Army units also destroyed missile launcher podiums south of At-Tibbi village to the north of Nasib crossing point in Dar'a province to the south of the country, eliminating a number of Jabhat al-Nusra terrorists on a bridge of al-Mayadin village and Ajiz Square in Dar'a eastern countryside. While in Idlib, the Syrian Arab Army destroyed Jabhat al-Nusra hideouts, killing a number of terrorists in Saraqib, Binish, Kafr Jalis and Sarmin, killing a large number of them, including the Saudi terrorist Abd Salam al-Sabhan. The Syrian Arab Army also destroyed terrorists' vehicles and killed many of them in Jana al-Biwai and al-Naqir, east of Murik in Hama countryside in central Syria. In Damascus countryside and in the western countryside of Damascus, Syrian Arab Army units continued their military operations, pursuing the terrorists in Az-Zabadani western mountains, maintaining control on the 1,715-meter heights mountaintops. Syrian Arab Army forces had maintained control over the right side of the western chain of the mountains at Qasr al-Namrud, and that coincided with maintaining control over the left side of the mountains at Wadi Janzir and the reefs of al-Lajaya and Dahr al-Bayadir in order to protect the advancing forces towards Al-Qamaz, Dahrat al-Huway, and that overlook Az-Zabadani Plains, Baqain and Madaya. The British Daily Mail newspaper has published new photos of the ISIL terrorists during their graduation ceremony from the School of Terrorism, run by the terrorist organization north of Syria. The photos taken in the city of Al-Raqqa show the 2015 batch of terrorists raising AK-47 rifles and waving ISIL mottos, although the graduates were wearing black clothes from head to foot, the paper says, and masks covering most of the face. Yet it is clear that the majority of them are teenagers who have been brainwashed, announcing themselves as jihadists, unaware that they are being used as guns, fuel. One of the photos show a prominent ISIL leader delivering his final lecture to the graduates before sending them off to fight in various provinces and governorates in Syria and Iraq, labeled by the terrorist organization as wilayat. At the end of the lecture, the terrorists hoisted ISIL flag to celebrate their graduation before taking part in a parade, and then led in the school bus to the front line. In Iraq, the Iraqi army eliminated 10 terrorists in airstrikes east of Al-Mosul city. Iraqi security sources said that the airstrikes on the terrorist hideouts in Mosul continued, targeting the terrorist positions and destroying their military capabilities. 13 people have been killed in air raids carried out by the Saudi-led coalition targeting the city of Aden in South Yemen. Sources at the Yemeni Interior Ministry said that the Saudi aircrafts fired 2 missiles, one hitting a bus in Khor Maksar, killing 8 people including a woman, and the other falling behind Aden University, killing the Saudi injuring various people. The Saudi warplanes had yesterday renewed their raids on the Yemeni capital Sana'a, which continued till dawn today, targeting its airport and a number of crucial vital establishments and some residential quarters. According to Yemeni sources, the Yemeni air defenses intercepted the Saudi warplanes, which have deliberately targeted and destroyed Yemeni infrastructure. 4 Saudi air raids had hit yesterday Hadda district in Faj'atan, west of Sana'a, with internationally prohibited rockets. They also targeted Aden Airport and Harbour, Taz Airport and Al-Mika seaport in a clearly intentional attack against the infrastructure of Yemen. Meanwhile, in response to the claims that the Saudi alliance forces had intercepted an Iranian shipment of weapons into Yemen, spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry Mardiya Afkham described the allegations as fabrications and pointed out that a civilian aircraft carrying medicine and health aid had been delivered to the Yemeni Red Crescent. In occupied Palestine, the Israeli occupation bulldozers started to demolish walls, houses and fences in the area of Hibse and Wadi al-Jawz neighborhood, near the historical wall of Al-Quds, with the aim of removing the Palestinian Arab character from the area in order to carry out projects that serve the scheme of Judaization of the city. Israeli occupation forces also launched an arrest campaign capturing a number of Palestinians in the West Bank. Meanwhile, Israeli occupation troops patrolled the streets and neighborhoods of the city of Hebron and set up checkpoints at the entrances of a number of towns. The Central Bank of Syria has set... Sorry? We'll go to our economic news after this break. The Central Bank of Syria has set the exchange rate of the US dollar against the Syrian pound at 228.32 for the banks and 228.36 for the exchange companies. The central bank also set the exchange rate of the US dollar against the Syrian pound at 227.23 for commercial and non-commercial purposes. On the other hand, the exchange rate of the euro against the Syrian pound was set at 248.2 for the banks and 248.7 for the exchange companies. Oil extended losses today as Iran and 6 world powers ramped up the pace of negotiations to reach a preliminary deal that could ease the sanctions and allow more Iranian crude onto world markets. European shares extended gains today and headed for their best quarterly performance in several years. Japan's Nikkei share average could end this year at its highest level since the late 1996, as a recovery in corporate earnings and better shareholder returns will continue to buoy risk appetite. Gold edged lower today and was heading for a second straight monthly fall, pressured by expectations that the U.S. Federal Reserve will increase interest rates this year. Spot gold was down 0.3% to reach $1,180 an ounce. The dollar rose against a basket of currencies and was on track for its best quarter since 2008, bolstered by the diverging outlook for monetary policy in the United States compared to other major economies. With this, we come to the end of our news for today. Thank you for watching. For more details about Syria and the region and to view this bulletin again, you can always visit our website in English, www.syriaonline.sy. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and Godspeed.